hush of frost clings to the timbered walls, wrapping stone and beam in a silence so complete it feels as though the earth itself has drawn breath and held it. The fire in the hearth has ebbed to faintly glowing coals, their red hearts pulsing slowly, like memory itself lingering in the dark. Outside, fields lie crusted in ice, branches bent beneath winter's weight. Inside, the small medieval dwelling stirs with life. The first sleep has ended. His breath clouds the frigid air. His body creaks like old wood. Slowly, deliberately, he lifts himself from the straw-stuffed mattress, the rough wool cloak scraping against his weathered neck. Around him lingers the scent of sweat, damp wool, and the faint ash of the evening fire. He is not startled. This waking is no thief, no interruption. It is part of the rhythm of life as it was for generations before him, this hour suspended between first and second sleep. Bare feet press against the frozen earth as he moves through the shadows. His hand finds the wooden table, gouged and worn by years of labor, remnants of supper scattered across it. Hardened rye bread, the rind of long-eaten cheese, the faint scent of onions. He lifts a rusted key, thumb tracing the iron teeth. Simple, yet heavy with meaning. A guardian of the granary, a symbol of stewardship and duty. Cold in his palm, it binds him to the countless hands that held it before, those who endured famine, plague, and war, each protecting life from hunger's relentless threat. By the glow of a single tallow candle, he kneels. The flame trembles, small as a star reflected in black water. He murmurs prayers, not learned from Latin chants, but fragments passed down like worn coins. Blessings for the livestock, pleas that his children wake at dawn breathing, hopes that the meager harvest will stretch through the harsh months. Smoke curls lazily, rising like a spirit released into the rafters. Beyond the walls, the world stirs faintly. An owl cries from a skeletal elm, a sheep shifts in its pen. Familiar sounds steady his heart, yet his thoughts wander to the visions of dreams that haunted him before waking. Droughted fields, soil cracked and bleeding beneath the sun, his father standing silently in the field, scythe in hand. In these hours, sleep and wakefulness intermingle. Spirits whisper, toil waits, and the weight of foresight presses upon him. He sits, hunched, cold seeping into his joints. He wonders, as his father once did, if these hours are blessing or curse. For some, a time of prayer. For others, quiet intimacy beneath furs. For still others, tending fire, watching livestock, mending tools. But every act in this fractured night shares one truth. In darkness, humanity brushes against silence, glimpsing the pulse of eternity closer than at any other hour. The air smells of iron from the key, tallow from the candle, smoke from the chimney. His stomach grumbles faintly, the hunger of a man rationing himself against winter's stretch. Memories of supper linger, the thick barley and turnip broth, faint salt pork, now mingling with ash's bitter aftertaste. He sets the key down. Cloak drawn tighter, he gazes at the flame, hoping for answers the candle cannot give. Duty waits unending, frozen fields to break, livestock to feed, carts to repair. Yet in this fragile seam of night, he feels something beyond toil. Reflection, loneliness, the inheritance of generations who rose from first sleep to meet shadows. Eyes closed, visions flow, children curled beneath woolen blankets, his wife stirring, whispering prayers, snow silent outside. Across Europe, countless others rise in this same hour, lighting candles against the same darkness, farmers, shepherds, mothers, all bound by this secret rhythm. The candle sputters, wax thick tears down its iron sconce. His prayer ends with a sigh. He lowers himself to the mattress, straw shifting beneath him, cloak wrapped tight, and lets quiet seep back in. Outside, the owl is silent. The sheep rest. Distant bells have ceased. Second sleep approaches, heavy, inevitable. Eyelids flutter, breath slows, and the world fades again into dream. This interlude, fragile hours of thought and shadow, becomes memory, dissolving like smoke from a snuffed flame. Yet the candle flickers faintly, holding the line between shadow and dawn, tethering him to both realms, sleeping and waking, mortal and eternal. And when morning's sun cracks over frost-glittered fields, he will rise once more as if the night had never been. Yet its memory lingers in marrow and mind, a hidden rhythm of existence. In this lies the mystery. Humanity once dreamed in two parts, and in these hushed hours, the soul glimpsed something beyond itself. The candle gutters. Smoke rises. The story drifts onward, carrying us deeper into the secret nights of the medieval world, where faith, fear, and longing wait in the pause between sleeps, and the heart of history beats quietly in the dark. The night is carved in silence. A shard of moonlight filters through a narrow lancet window, striking the cold stone floor in a pale ribbon of silver. Dust motes drift like fallen spirits in the beam, slow and weightless, suspended in eternity. Within the monastery's cloister, the world lies in hushed stillness, walls breathing centuries of prayer and penance. The air is damp, carrying the scent of limestone and candle smoke, tinged faintly with incense that has long since burned away. And in the small stone cell, a monk stirs. His first sleep has ended. He rises from the wooden cot, back stiff from years of austere rest, breath escaping in a faint cloud against the cold. His habit whispers as he moves, rough wool against flesh, the fabric a constant reminder of vows that bound him to poverty, chastity, obedience. The silence here is not empty. It is heavy, thick, alive with memory. Each sound, a creak of timber, the faint sigh of the wind through cracks in the stone, becomes amplified in this hour between sleeps. He crosses the chamber, bare feet touching frozen flagstone, toes curling against the chill. On the desk rests a psalter, its leather cracked, its pages softened by centuries of hands. He opens it, and the parchment breathes a faint rasp, the smell of ink and age rising into the air. He bows his head, fingers tracing the lines as though touching relics. Latin words spill from his lips in hushed rhythm, the chant of the night office, each syllable trembling, each phrase freighted with the weight of sin and salvation. Domine, miserere nobis. Lord, have mercy on us. His voice is quiet, almost swallowed by the stone, yet it lingers like smoke in the rafters. For this is the hour of devotion. A waking in the middle of night, not for rest but for confrontation. Of guilt, of memory, of the ceaseless war between flesh and spirit. His chant is broken only by his own breathing and the soft flutter of wings. A sparrow, startled from sleep, beats against the rafters before settling once more. Even this bird is a companion in the exile of night. His thoughts wander, as they so often do in these vigils. He recalls the life he left behind, fields of tilled earth, his mother's hand rough with harvest, his father's voice carried on the clang of tools. He remembers the hearth fire of his youth, the taste of roasted barley bread, the laughter of siblings before plague took them. These memories haunt the silence as much as prayer does. And in these moments, kneeling by candlelight, he is both son and servant, sinner and supplicant. The candle gutters, casting shadows that stretch like specters across the wall. They shift and sway with each tremor of flame, ghostly shapes that remind him of temptations never fully banished, desires buried under vows, regrets wrapped in penance. He lowers his eyes, forcing his lips to move faster, pressing the prayers like stones against the flood of memory. The Psalms are not mere words. They are chains to bind the heart, ropes to keep the soul from drifting into the abyss. The air grows colder. His knees ache against the hard stone, yet he does not rise. He presses his forehead to the Psalter's page, inhaling the scent of ancient parchment, as if the ink itself holds salvation. The faint toll of a bell drifts through the cloister, matins, the call of midnight prayer. Its bronze voice rolls across the monastery, reverberating in his chest, reminding him that he is not alone in this vigil. Beyond these walls, dozens of brothers rise as he does, lighting candles, muttering chants, confessing sins to the listening dark. The monastery is alive, even when silent. Each chamber a cell of devotion, each monk a flicker in the great constellation of prayer. Together they form a web of voices, woven across the night like an invisible tapestry, binding heaven and earth with whispered liturgy. Yet within his cell, he feels the solitude keenly. Each man prays alone, and alone faces the specter of his own thoughts. He recalls stories told by elder brothers, that these hours, this waking between sleeps, is when the veil thins. That angels move through the cloister, unseen but felt, their wings stirring the air. That demons, too, prowl at thresholds, whispering doubt, stirring fatigue into temptation. This thought chills him more than the stone. He clutches the crucifix at his breast, pressing the cold metal into his skin until it stings, as if pain itself might banish the shadows gathering in his mind. Time lingers strangely here. Minutes stretch like hours, and hours collapse into moments. He reads, he chants, he breathes, all while the candle drips steady tears of wax down its iron holder. The wax pools like frozen rivers, hardening into shapes that seem almost alive, like hands reaching or chains coiling. He watches them, lost in thought, until the flame wavers, threatening to die. He cups it with his palm, guarding it from the draught. Light must endure. The psalter closes with a soft thud. His voice falters into silence. He leans back against the wall, eyes closing, breath steadying. In this pause, after the chant, he feels the strange sweetness of exhaustion, an intimacy with God born not of strength, but of weakness. He is not grand, not heroic, not saintly. He is a man awake when the world sleeps, whispering words into the void, hoping they are heard. And that, perhaps, is enough. The bell tolls again, fainter now, echoing through the cloister like the heartbeat of the monastery. He knows dawn is still far, but the second sleep waits. He rises, knees stiff, and lowers himself back onto the cot. The wood creaks, the straw rustles, the candle sputters low. He pulls the rough blanket over his shoulders, scratching against his skin, and exhales a long breath into the silence. As his eyes close, he feels the chamber still alive with presence, shadows still shifting, birds still stirring, silence still charged with unseen watchers. He drifts, slowly, back into dream. His final thought, faint as the last flicker of flame, is of forgiveness, of the endless search for absolution that fills these night vigils. The candle gutters once more, a final spark before smoke curls upward into the stone. And as the monk slips into his second sleep, the monastery exhales with him, one breath among many, one soul folded back into the night. Beyond these walls, frost glitters on the cloister stones. The night remains vast, heavy with waiting. And soon the story will move outward, beyond the cell, beyond the cloister, into the greater world where sleep, faith, and survival entwine in the darkness of history. The embers crackle faintly, breathing their last sigh into the chill of night. The hearth has burned low, the once bright flames reduced to a bed of red ash, glowing like wounded hearts beneath layers of gray. The cottage is small, walls blackened by years of smoke, the timber beams sagging like tired shoulders. Frost clings to the edges of the single window, where the outside world waits in silence, fields blanketed in snow, trees skeletal and still. Inside, she stirs. The widow wakes from her first sleep, eyes open to a darkness heavy with absence. The air smells of smoke and stale ale, faint traces of the supper long past. Her shawl slips from her shoulders as she rises, the wool rough against skin thin from years of labor. The floor creaks under her step, every sound amplified in the quiet, an echo of solitude. She presses a palm against the table for balance, the wood scarred by knives, by years of meals shared with a husband now gone. Her fingers brush a rust-stained ring, lying where she left it before sleep. It is small, worn smooth by decades of touch, but heavy with memory. She lifts it, holding it to the candle's dim light. The gold no longer gleams. It is darkened by time, dulled by grief. Her hand trembles as she closes her fist around it. She remembers how it once warmed her finger, how it bound her life to another's, how it promised companionship against hunger, plague, war. Now it is nothing but metal and absence. The silence presses in. She hears only the whisper of wind through the cracks in the shutter, the distant cry of an owl hunting in the night. Her thoughts drift to the sound of his voice, the laughter that once filled this room like a second fire. She recalls his footsteps on this very floor, the creak of the bed as he settled beside her, the way he cleared his throat before speaking. These memories arrive like ghosts, summoned by the stillness, filling the space left by the living. She bends over the hearth, gathering the remaining embers with an iron poker. Sparks leap, brief as dying stars, before fading back into ash. She blows gently, breath mingling with smoke, coaxing the faintest glow into momentary life. The smell of soot and char fills her lungs. She coughs softly, but persists, for the fire is more than warmth. It is survival. Without it, dawn would find the cottage colder, harsher, more unyielding. Without it, the long night could swallow her whole. As she tends the coals, her thoughts wander back to dreams that haunted her before waking. She had seen him again, her husband, standing in the doorway with a face half lit by fire, saying nothing, only watching. She had dreamed of laughter too, the kind that warmed even famine-thin winters, the kind that carried them through nights of sickness and fear. Dreams feel sharper in these hours between sleeps. They cling like cobwebs, woven tight, impossible to shake away. She whispers a prayer into the darkness. It is not the Latin of priests or the polished verses of psalters, but the raw murmuring of a heart alone. She prays for the children, who left with plague years before, their absence still carved into the silence of the cottage. She prays for her husband's soul, wandering now where her arms cannot follow. She prays for her own endurance, for strength to rise again with the dawn. Each word curls upward with the smoke, invisible but felt, binding her grief to something greater. The room is filled with small details, each carrying the weight of survival. The iron pot still hanging above the hearth, its inside lined with the ghost of broth. The wooden spoon resting on the table, worn thin by use. The patched cloak hanging on a peg, stiff with frost from where it was left near the door. These objects are her companions, relics of a life sustained in quiet endurance. She turns toward the bed where once two slept. The blanket is pulled to one side, leaving the space beside her starkly empty. She runs her hand along the coarse fabric, fingers pressing into hollows where his form used to rest. The gesture is wordless, but it speaks louder than prayer. This space, once shared, is now a monument to absence. The night deepens. She moves back to the hearth, settling onto the stool, shawl pulled tight once more. Her body aches with the weariness of labor and grief. She stares into the embers, watching as they collapse into themselves, fading with each passing moment. And yet, as she watches, she feels something stir. Not joy, not even hope, but endurance. She sees in the dying fire the reflection of her own survival, stubborn and quiet, refusing to be extinguished. A faint sound breaks the silence. The creak of the roof timbers as the wind shifts, the faint rustle of branches brushing the walls. For a moment, she imagines it is his step outside, his hand on the latch. But no hand comes, no voice answers. Only the night remains, heavy and unyielding. Still, she does not despair. She sits with the ashes, with the silence, with the memories. For this hour between sleeps is not merely a passage of time. It is a vigil, a keeping of presence for those who are gone, a tether to life, however fragile, however solitary. At last, she gathers the shawl around her shoulders, fingers still clutching the ring. She lowers herself back onto the bed, listening as the wind softens, as the silence deepens. She lies facing the empty side, her breath slow, her eyes heavy. The embers glow faintly, their last light painting her face with a dim, tender warmth. And as she slips into her second sleep, she carries the ring with her, clasped tightly in her hand. Its weight is small, but in the dream world where memory and reality entwine, it binds her once more to him, to the life they shared, to the love that lingers like smoke after fire. The cottage breathes with her, one soul alone in the night. Outside, frost hardens over field and road. The world waits in silence for dawn, and in that silence, her story becomes the story of countless others. Widows and widowers, mothers and fathers, all who kept watch with ashes, all who rose again when the second sleep carried them back into darkness. The embers pulse once, then fade. A final sigh of warmth in a room heavy with memory, and the night moves on, carrying her into the depths of dream, into the waiting embrace of shadows. The torches along the inner ward hiss like dying serpents, their flames gnawed by the wind that slips through arrow slits and along cold stone. A fog has climbed out of the moat and draped the lower bailey in a milky veil. The drawbridge chains groan softly, iron whispering against iron, as if the castle itself is shifting in its sleep. Somewhere a bell has long since tolled curfew, and silence thickens in its wake, heavy, watchful, expectant. In a corner room off the gatehouse, a soldier opens his eyes. He has risen from his first sleep as the hour demands. Straw rustles under him. The wool of his cloak scratches the stubble at his neck. He tastes last night's small ale in his mouth, coppery and stale, and the ghost of salted herring lingers there too. He rolls his shoulders and feels the ache laid down by years of drill and chill. The spear beside him, ash shaft oiled smooth by his hand, waits like an obedient hound. He takes it up, fingers closing around the haft, and stands. The room is sour with sweat and damp leather, the floor a scatter of hobnail prints and ash from the brazier that has gone dull and gray. A companion turns over on the rushes and mutters a prayer in his sleep. Another guard, already awake, knots his belt and says nothing. Words are rationed at this hour, like grain in a lean winter. The soldier steps into the corridor. The stones hold the day's cold like a hoard, passing it upward through his soles until it settles in his bones. He pulls his cloak close, checks the iron hook that holds the Sallyport bar in place, and feels the wood's stubborn weight with a practiced shove. The bar does not budge. He touches the hinge out of habit, palm grazing a bead of frozen condensation. He keeps moving. He knows the route, from gatehouse to curtain wall, along the wall walk that bites the wind like a knife, down into the inner ward where the chapel crouches with its slate roof hunched against the sky, then past the granary, the stables, the kitchen yard where char and tallow and garlic have soaked so deep into the stones that even night can't scour them away. He walks under banners made limp by damp, past shields leaning like slain men against a rack, past a coil of rope used to raise the postern, the rope stiff with crusted salt from storms long finished. The ravens are awake. He can hear them, perhaps smell them, a slick note of carrion that rides the wind from the midden. Their bodies are no more than smudges in the fog, but this is their hour, the seam of the night, when meat is cool and unguarded and men are tired. He ascends the stair to the battlements, a spiral that twists him tighter around the keep's heart. At the Merlon, he pauses. Fog presses the world inward until it feels as small as his own breath. The village beyond the moat is erased, the path to the abbey gone, the hedgerows vanished. He squints and sees only his own breath, leaving him in pale plumes. Somewhere beyond the white, the river runs with patient violence, dragging its dark hemiments of ice toward the sea. He lays the spear beside him and strokes the stone with a gloved hand, as if the wall were a living thing that needs soothing. He thinks, as he always does in this hour, of oaths. The day he knelt before his lord in the great hall, flagstones scrubbed, rushes fresh, a pig turning on a spit in the center, and swore fealty with both hands wrapped around another man's. The weight of a palm, the gaze of witnesses, the thin smile of the steward who counted coin and counted men with the same narrow eyes. He has kept that oath through harvest levies and winter sieges, through arrows shrilling off the parapets and the night a bright blue under moonlight and steel. Duty is not a story told by minstrels. It is a belt that never unbuckles, a chain across the chest. Below, the stables snort and shuffle. He hears a horse stamp, impatient with the cold. In the kitchen yard, a banked fire exhales a thin thread of smoke, and with it comes the ghost scent of onions and bone broth, yesterday's meal, clinging to the present. The soldier's stomach answers with a low, embarrassed growl. On another night, he might steal down to cup a hand over the embers, coax a crust of heat from them, maybe sip from a crock left too near the hearth. Not tonight. Tonight, the fog feels like a thing that could climb stairs. He moves on, boots grating on grit. The bell rope by the gatehouse hangs like an unstruck threat, its fibers roughened by grease and hands. He remembers the last time it sang, raiders on the far field, torches swaying, a flicker of doubt in his captain's face before the order to shut the outer gate. Everyone ran then, the carters stumbling, the kitchen boys gaping, the laundress dragging wet linen like drowned flags. That was a season of shrieking horses and splintered shields, a season when the surgeon's room smelled of vinegar and iron, and the chapel smelled of beeswax and grief. He has not forgotten the way blood turns black on straw. Two figures emerge from the fog on the wall walk, fellow watchmen, breath flaring white, faces pale in the moon's thin trouble. They share the passphrase, that thin thread of trust, a saint's name and a thing to eat, easy words in a world too often full of hard ones. Saint Bride and Barley, he says, and the other answers, Saint Bride and Barley. They pass, and for a breath he is less alone. Midnight is a seam. He can feel it physically, a shift in the castle's respiration. The first sleep is gone from most chambers, and the second has not yet claimed them all. He hears things he never hears at noon. A cough behind a door, the sigh of a baby who will wake en route soon, the scrape of a quill in the steward's closet, where accounts are figured even against the dark. At the chapel, a single lamp burns before the rood, and for a moment he pauses at the door. Pine pitch and frankincense hold there in the air, mingled like memory and smoke. He reaches out, fingers brushing the thick oak, its nailheads cold as coins. He does not enter. He bows his head, lips moving, words thin and unshaped. Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy. The night takes his breath and gives him back a steadier one. On his way toward the keep's base, he passes the granary. He knows what sleeps within. Wheat and rye measured with a jealous eye, barley for pottage, sacks of salt that are worth more than a man's word. The lock on the door is iron, squat and stubborn. Frost has furred it white. He touches it, more reflex than thought, feeling the cold bite up into his knuckle. The chain at the drawbridge creaks again and he turns, heart too quick for the space of a breath. Fog. Only fog moving like a herd of ghost cattle across the moat. He listens until the sound becomes only his pulse in his ears. He thinks of his child, hair smelling of wool and smoke, cheeks cold from the draft that always sneaks under the cottage door, and of the woman who holds the child when he cannot. He thinks of all the doors he has guarded that are not his, the steward's chest where coin sleeps, the barracks where men groan like old ships, the solar where his lord and lady whisper in a hush that is both tenderness and power. A man can be the wall and still feel like a window. He swallows the thought and keeps walking. A small movement draws his gaze. The upper keep, a narrow window not much larger than a shield boss, the kind used to pour light upon a desk or to lift a prayer into the cold. Behind that slit, a pale glow stirs, not steady like the steward's lamp, but thin, fluttering. He knows the chamber. The lady's daughter sleeps there when she is at home. The tapestry of St. Margaret hangs over the bed. A carved coffer at its foot holds lace veils and letters tied with ribbon. He sees nothing, only the hint of motion in the light, perhaps a hand, perhaps the draft. Still, he pauses, as if his attention itself were a mantle placed beneath that window. He lifts his spear and plants its butt softly on the stone, the sound a muted prayer. Wind moves the flag at the keep's crown, and it flaps once, as if reminding the sky of its place. He rewraps the cloak, grateful for the cheap miracle of wool, and descends toward the inner ward. Steps, breath, the faint clink of the iron ring that holds his dagger against his hip, these are the drum and fife of the watch. The kitchen door shivers with a dream, and then is still. The guard crosses the yard, and a raven utters a single syllable from the well head, a curse or a blessing. He cannot tell which. At the gatehouse again, he ducks under the arch where damp blooms like a bruise. A rat skitters with the last of the day's crumbs in its mouth, vanishing into a crack that no mason can find. He drinks from the leather flask at his belt, small ale, thin, faintly sweet, and feels warmth flare inside his ribs like tinder accepting spark. He offers the flask to the younger guard on the bench. The boy shakes his head, eyes too wide with a watchman's first winter. "Sleep when you can," the soldier says, voice a rasp. The boy nods and pulls his cloak tighter. The older man sets the flask aside. The hour leans towards second sleep. The castle loosens again, the way a body does after a sob, shoulders relaxing, breath lengthening. He returns to the wall one last time. The fog is lifting now in strips, and the sky above the eastern trees has taken on a color like old pewter. The spear's weight is companionable in his hand. He thinks of the day to come, the lists to be mended, a strap to be re-riveted on a borrowed shield, doth the stable master's temper, stew that will taste of smoke and onions and the day before. He thinks of nothing at all. He is the wall. He is the hinge. He is the bell unstruck, the rope unpulled, the torch half alive. And then the sound. Not a shout, not a clamor. A soft hinge far above, the sigh of a small door opening where the high folk sleep. It is the gentlest of summons, the kind only those awake in the seam of night can hear. He looks up and sees that narrow glow shift again, sees the delicate tremble of a veil at the window, as if a breath has just passed through it from within. He cannot see her, the girl with the locket and the grief stitched into its clasp. He sees only light like a held breath. He stands watching until the fog takes the window back. He lowers the spear, turns toward the stair, and begins to walk, footfall, breath, the hum of a life knotted by oaths and held by stone. Behind him, the castle settles. Before him, the next chamber of night opens like a door on hidden hinges, and beyond it waits a quiet room where a young voice whispers prayers to the dead. He will sleep again soon. She will wake, and the watchlight will pass like a blessing from wall to window, from duty to longing, carrying the night's hush into a story that does not end. The great hall breathes with silence. Stone walls loom high, their banners hanging limp in the draught, their woven saints and beasts staring with glassy patience into the dark. A single brazier smolders in the far corner, its coals fading to a sullen glow, a faint thread of smoke spiraling upward into rafters lost in shadow. Outside, the winter moon spills through narrow windows, washing the chamber in pale silver. And within her bed of carved oak, beneath a canopy of velvet heavy with dust and time, a noble girl opens her eyes. She wakes from her first sleep as the hour itself commands. Her body shifts beneath furs and linen sheets, the air prickling against her skin where warmth has slipped away. The scent of lavender sachets lingers faintly, meant to ward against fleas and fever, but time has dulled their sweetness, leaving only a dry, medicinal edge. She draws a breath, tasting the cold, stone and damp, the echo of wood smoke that clings to the draped hangings. Her hands search for comfort and find only emptiness. She rises slowly, silk slippers brushing the floor with a sigh of fabric against stone. The flagstones are icy, their chill biting through to her bones. She moves with care, wrapping her cloak about her shoulders, the velvet lined with fur that whispers against her cheek. Her gaze falls upon the small locket resting on the table beside her bed. She lifts it, thumb grazing its smooth surface, and opens it with a click soft as a heartbeat. Inside, a painted image, her mother, eyes dark and tender, lips curved in a smile she barely remembers. A mother lost years ago to plague, her face surviving only in pigment and memory. The girl presses the locket to her chest, its metal cold, its weight unbearable and necessary all at once. The silence of the hall is not empty. It hums with unseen presences. The tapestries rustle faintly in the draft, their threads catching the moonlight in flashes like moving eyes. The fire in the brazier spits once, sending up a scent of charred oak. A dog in the courtyard barks briefly, then falls still. She kneels upon the flagstone, cloak gathered close, locket still warm in her palm. Her lips begin to move, whispering a prayer in the tongue of her mother's people, soft syllables that flow like a lullaby from her childhood. She asks for protection, for peace, for her father's safe return from the king's court. She asks for her own strength, though she does not name it aloud. Her words drift into the dark, blending with the silence, yet the act of speaking steadies her. The candle beside her flickers, wax dripping down its iron sconce, each droplet hissing like a falling tear. Shadows lengthen and retreat across the floor, twisting into shapes that suggest watchers, guardians, or perhaps enemies. She does not flinch. This is the hour of hidden courage, when she is unseen by steward, by servants, by the weight of the household. In this liminal space between sleeps, she belongs only to herself and to the silent company of memory. Her ears catch a sound, faint, far away, the brush of strings. Somewhere in the servants' quarters, a lute has been lifted and a cord plucked as softly as a breath. Perhaps it is practice, perhaps longing, perhaps merely accident, but the note trembles through the hall, a ghost of music that vanishes almost as soon as it begins. She tilts her head, listening, heart tightening. The music reminds her of feast days when minstrels filled the hall with song, of dancing in bright gowns, of laughter spilling over goblets of spiced wine. That world feels far, unreachable through the silence that now reigns. She bows her head again, candlelight painting her face with a gentle glow. The locket rests heavy in her palm. She feels guilt press upon her chest, though she cannot name its cause. Guilt for surviving when others did not. Guilt for resenting her father's distance, his duty to the king. Guilt for the freedoms she dares to taste in these secret hours of wakefulness. The prayer shifts, becomes confession without priest, becomes yearning without voice. Time passes strangely. The shadows seem to breathe with her, swelling and receding, as if the hall itself inhales and exhales. She thinks of the future. Marriage arranged by parchment, a life dictated by alliances, her days woven into the will of men who will never kneel here in silence. Her hands clutch the locket tighter, nails biting into her palm. The candle drips another tear of wax. Then a sound breaks the silence. A door creaks, slow and careful. The girl lifts her head, heart hammering. The great hall is still, but the sound lingers. A hinge, a footstep, a shifting in the draft. She rises quickly, cloak falling around her like wings, locket hidden in her palm. She turns toward the door at the far end of the chamber. Nothing moves, only the shadows, only the silence. Yet the sense of presence remains. She breathes deeply, steadying herself. Perhaps it was only the wind, only the weight of old wood settling. Perhaps not. She returns to the bedside, slipping beneath the covers, cloak still tight around her. The locket rests beneath her pillow, cool against her cheek. The candle sputters, its flame low, its smoke curling upward in ribbons that vanish into the rafters. Her eyes close, but not with fear, with resolve. She drifts toward her second sleep, carrying with her the prayer whispered in her mother's tongue, the sound of the lone lute string, the silent vow of courage she did not speak. The hall remains vast, shadowed, alive with unseen watchers. The brazier exhales one last breath of smoke. The veil of silence descends once more, soft and total. Outside, the fog thickens along the moat, cloaking the keep in secrecy. The castle exhales, the noble girl drifts, and the night waits for its next stirring. The longhouse sleeps in layers of breath and shadow. A single hearth glows at its center, embers collapsing into themselves with faint sighs, their light a blood-red thread against the black. The air is thick, sweat, smoke, hay, the sour tang of damp wool. Bodies are bundled on straw pallets around the walls, children curled like kittens beneath rough-spun cloaks, men sprawled with hands against their bellies, women huddled with infants pressed close to breast. And yet, in this communal silence, one woman stirs. She wakes from her first sleep as the fire's warmth falters. Her body aches, spine bent from a day of threshing, hands cracked from cold water and coarse rope. She shifts, careful not to wake the child at her side. His small whimper pierces the stillness, a sound fragile as birdsong. She gathers him up, pressing him against her chest. His hair smells of smoke and milk, his cheek hot with restless dreams. She rocks him gently, humming, a lullaby older than memory, a song passed from mother to daughter, like bread baked in the same clay oven. The embers flare weakly as she bends to stir them with a charred stick. Sparks leap, gold and brief, like stars rising only to vanish. Smoke curls upward into the rafters, where cured meats hang in darkened rows, their scent mingled with the sharpness of soot. She breathes it in, though hunger stabs her belly. The evening's pottage was thin, barley gruel with a shard of carrot, broth stretched with water until taste became memory. Still, the smell lingers, faint and mocking, as if the meal itself were taunting her with what little it gave. She presses her child tighter, humming louder to soothe him. Around her, the longhouse remains restless. The snore of a drunkard uncle, the soft cough of an elder whose lungs are black with years of fire smoke, the shuffle of a dog scratching in the corner. Every sound is a reminder that survival is shared. Life is communal, as fragile as the flame that holds them all together. Her eyes lift to the roof, where the smoke hole gapes like a wound into the sky. Through it, the moon gleams pale, a sliver of cold silver watching them sleep. She imagines the saints looking down through that hole, eyes pitying, hands folded in blessing. She whispers a prayer under her breath, half for the child in her arms, half for herself. That the frost will not kill the barley shoots come spring, that the Lord's tithe will not leave them starving, that the pestilence carried in whispers will pass by their door. Her words dissolve into the smoke, mingling with the prayers of countless peasants before her, rising like invisible incense to a heaven that seldom answers. She sets the child down, smoothing his hair with a calloused hand. Her fingers brush the rusted harness hook at her hip, still attached to her belt, a symbol of her service in the fields, of her body tethered to earth and toil. She thinks of the day's labor, the smell of wet earth, the rhythm of flails striking grain, the pain in her back from bending too long over furrows. These memories fill the silence, crowding her thoughts like crows on a carcass. She returns to the hearth, blowing into the embers. Ash rises, soft and gray, settling again on her skin, her lashes, her lips. The heat stings her face, faint but real, and she drinks it in as if it were salvation. The child stirs, sighs, falls quiet. For a moment, she is alone with the fire, the most faithful of companions. Its light flickers over her face, deepening shadows under her eyes, painting her skin with red and black. She sees in it both the danger of extinguishment and the promise of survival. Dreams cling at the edge of her thoughts, fragments of what she saw before waking. A field of wheat taller than men, golden and endless. Her husband alive again, laughing with a mug of ale in hand, the plague cart rattling down the lane, wheels streaked with blood. Dreams and memory merge in this hour, confusing what is and what was. She swallows them down, humming again to silence the ghosts. A raven croaks outside, harsh and sudden. She stiffens. Ravens mean omen. Ravens mean death. Yet in these villages they are simply neighbors, eating what humans leave behind. Still, the sound unsettles her. She draws her cloak tighter, feeling its weight like armor against the night. Her lips press once more to prayer, quiet and insistent, as if words alone might banish death from her threshold. Around her, the others begin to stir. A man turns, muttering in his sleep. A child scratches at flea bites, whimpering. The longhouse breathes, restless, alive. This is not solitude, yet she feels isolation press heavier than the roof's timber. For in these hours between sleeps, every soul faces their own demons. Hers are hunger, grief, and fear of tomorrow. Another's may be lust, another's guilt, another's despair. All share the same smoke, the same roof, the same fragile fire, but each heart burns alone. The embers crackle once, faint but defiant. She stares at them, seeing more than fire. She sees hope refusing to die, even when reduced to ash. She sees her own endurance, her body worn but unbroken, her spirit stretched but not snapped. She sees her child's future, fragile and uncertain, yet tethered to her every breath. She leans close to the fire, whispering to it as if to a friend. "Stay with us," she murmurs. Her words are not meant to be heard by others. They are meant for the flame, for the night, for the silence itself. Her voice cracks but does not break. At last, her body yields to weariness. She gathers the child once more, pressing his cheek against her breast. She lies back upon the straw, cloak spread around them both. The fire glows faintly, its light pulsing against the beams above like a heartbeat. Her eyelids grow heavy, her breath slowing, sinking with the rhythm of the longhouse. The second sleep descends, soft as snow. She carries into it her prayer, her hunger, her lullaby, her will. She carries into it the stubborn ember of survival, the belief that tomorrow can still be endured. The hearth sighs, releasing smoke like a lament. The rafters hold it, the moon watches through the smoke hole, the raven calls once more. And then silence. The night closes its hand around the longhouse, sealing its sleepers in the fragile warmth of shared breath, fragile dreams, and the trembling promise of dawn.